Question. A cone-shaped structure is being built to store road salt for a city. If the height will be 5 yards and the structure must hold 60 pi cubic yards, how long will the diameter be in yards? Okay, so let's just underline some of the key stuff here. So, some key information. Cone is the shape that we're dealing with. And it's going to store something. So we're going to be talking about volume because we're filling it. Okay. We know the height and we know the volume. How long will the diameter be in yards? So what we're trying to figure out is the diameter. So we're going to need a formula, and on the formula sheet it gives us the formula for the cone. Okay, so I'm going to start by writing down the formula. Volume is equal to 1/3 pi r squared h. And let's get rid of that. Okay, so when we first look at this, it tells us the volume 60 pi. It looks a little silly to have 60 pi for a volume. Usually volume would be nice numbers like 2 cubic feet or 10 cubic meters or 21.2 cubic centimeters. It's very rare to see it with a pi, but the reason why they've done this in this question is because the equation has a pi as well. It's going to help to cancel out and give us a nice number at the end that won't be a decimal. So first step, let's sub in what we know. So first thing's V, we know the volume, it's 60 pi. Don't put it in your calculator yet. Always wait as long as possible to put it in your calculator so that you get the most accurate answer possible. And maybe we don't need a calculator. Sometimes you can just do it in your head and get an accurate answer, or with a little bit of scrap work in writing. Okay, 5 yards is the h, the height, so we don't have the radius. We do have the height, it's 5. Okay, so number one rule when you're dealing with formulas is sub in what you know and solve for what you don't. If we look back to the question, that last little part of the question always gives you a clue. How long will the diameter be in yards? Diameter. We don't have diameter here. We do have radius, so once we find the radius, we can find the diameter. Don't forget that last step. Okay, so we're trying to get the radius all by itself. We're trying to isolate the radius. Let's rewrite this one more time in a nice way. The 5 and the pi can go together because they both are really numbers. And we want to get the radius by itself. So we could divide by 5 to get rid of that 5. And they'll cancel. What we do to one side, we do to the other. And you know what? Since this is canceling out so nicely, why don't we continue? And we can also do the pi and cancel that out as well. So that worked out really nice. And on this side the pi's cancel, so we have 60 divided by 5. You could probably do this in your head. If you really want to, you can write out the work just to make sure. 5 goes into 60 one time. 5 goes into 10 two times. So we have 12 is equal to r squared. Okay, so what's your answer here for the radius? The radius is equal to the square root of 12. And really we don't want the radius, we want the diameter. So how do we figure out the diameter? We know diameter is 2 times radius. Diameter is 2 times our radius is square root of 12. Okay? It's possible that you could have this radical and maybe you don't have an answer to choose that matches it. You might have to rewrite the radical. You might have to simplify it a little bit. So 12 is a pretty big number to have inside the radical. If 12 could be broken into or factored into some perfect squares, we could square root them and take them out. We could simplify it a little bit more. So 12 could be written as 2 times 6. Is 2 a perfect square? No. Perfect squares are numbers like that can be multiplied by themselves. Are numbers that are made out of a number multiplied by itself. That would be a better way to explain it. So numbers that are like something squared. So 2 is not a perfect square. 4 is a perfect square. 9, 16, 25, those are perfect squares. Okay, so breaking up 12 into 2 and 6 won't work. We could break up 12 into 3 and 4. Are either of these perfect squares? Yes, the 4 is. So we can do 3 times 4. I did a little dot for multiplication here. Now it is true that the square root of 3 times 4 is equal to the square root of 3 times the square root of 4. And the square root of 4 is equal to 2. So I have 2 times root 3 times 2. So I have a 2 times a 2 is a 4. So now I have a number for the diameter. As much as possible, we would want to keep something in exact form. And units would be yards. A yard is similar to feet or meters. I think a yard is bigger than feet, more comparable to a meter, but not exactly equal to a meter. We don't need to write the cubic for the cubic yards because that is like m cubed. That tells you that it's a yard. Cubed, that would be a volume unit. We just want a length unit, so just yards. And that's the end of the question. One other thing we could say is if you were stuck on this question, maybe you got as far as here, 2 times root 12, and maybe your possible choices were things like 4 root 3, 2 root 6, all kinds of choices that all had roots that were different. One strategy you could use would be to type this into your calculator, get a decimal number, and type each of the choices into your calculator to get a decimal, and then when you have numbers all in decimals, you're able to compare them a little bit more easily. Okay, now it's the end of the question.